Warning: this is a true crime channel and is not for the faint of heart or the easily impressionable. This video may contain details that some viewers may find highly disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You have been warned.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel where I still don't have any of the proper equipment. I refuse to follow the script. And where I am honestly running out of snappy one-liners for the last part of my intro. A comedian I am not. And considering how few videos I've actually uploaded, the fact that I'm already running out of shtick is actually quite sad. I may need to outsource my jokes. I also apologize if my voice sounds a bit odd or if I'm not, shouting and as chatty as I normally am. I'm actually not feeling very well at the moment. I don't know if I'm getting sick or not, so I'm probably going to keep this as to the facts as much as possible and try not to go too off topic like I normally do. Anyway, today's episode is going to be extra special because not only is it a double feature because I am running way behind on my list. I promised to do this video actually last week, and just things kind of got in the way. It was actually supposed to be a live stream, and it just never happened. I never got the chance to sit down and actually do this. And also, because it is a personal request from my martial arts instructor. His name is Damon. Everyone say hi in the chat to him. So he'll probably kick my ass on Tuesday. Hi, Damon! See, I told you I was going to do the video. Anyway, this video that I'm actually doing now actually also hit about a 5.8 on my creepy shitometer, as Damon decided to tell me several weeks ago, last I saw him, that he actually had a bit of a brush with the first of the two topics that I'll be discussing today. So let's get into this bloodbath, shall we? You all know the drill by now. Pick your poison, sit back, relax, and let's have ourselves a little conversation. Today's topics will be on none other than the Coleman and Debra Brown killings and the Atlanta child murders. But like I said, because this is a double feature and I'm not feeling very well, and I don't want this to be a 2-hour video like the Ted Bundy one was, because that was just fucking exhausting. I'll try to keep this as simple and as commentary-free as possible. No promises, though. Now, Alton Coleman and Debra Brown actually are pretty set apart from other killers on my list of horror, and in fact, they are set apart because, one, they are a duo of killers, much like more of a modern-day version of Bonnie and Clyde, but also because they are, in fact, let's see if I can make this sound horrible, politically correct, and make myself look like a total jackass at the same time. Let's see, I got it. They are killers of color. I probably shouldn't have phrased it that way, because this video is probably going to get flagged for it, but it's too good to change it now. What I mean by that is the fact that there are, at least in the United States, very few black serial killers. In fact, more than 90% of all serial killers are white. It's not a race thing, it's just a fact. And I really have no answer for why that is. I mean, there's very few Latino serial killers as well. There's even very few Asian serial killers as well. Maybe us white people are just that fucking crazy. I don't know. But moving on. The rap sheet that actually reads for both Alton Coleman and Debra Brown are as follows: 8 murders, 7 rapes, 3 kidnappings, 14 armed robberies, and a partridge in a motherfucking pear tree. Now, all of these things actually happened between May and July of 1984. This was all within a 3-month span. You want to talk about Bonnie and Clyde, holy fucking shit. Coleman was actually born in Illinois and was more or less raised by his grandmother, who actually ran a gambling house out of her own apartment. Would not fly today. I can tell you that right now. That would not fly. Now, Debra Brown, on the other hand, she was also born in Illinois, though it doesn't state where. She was actually one of 11 children and was more or less an enigma to law enforcement before she met Coleman. Now, Coleman was actually diagnosed with mixed personality disorder, antisocial narcissistic, and obsessive features with this as well, which just adds to the fuckery of it. With also the additional diagnoses, which include epileptic spasms, psychosis, and borderline personality disorder. So basically what you have is the motherlode of oh fuck cocktails brewing in this guy's head. That's about as bad as it can get. That's pretty much it. Unless you're gonna add in schizophrenia in there, it can't get much worse than that. Now, when Alton Coleman met Debra Brown in 1983, Coleman was 28 and had already had numerous sex crimes and multiple robberies on his rap sheet already. Brown, on the other hand, was 21 and had lived a relatively quiet life up until that point. She actually had experienced severe head trauma as a small child, and because of this, had a very low IQ, actually in the single digits, actually, and was actually deemed borderline mentally disabled. She was able to, go from day-to-day life, but she basically had a very childlike mentality. She was very trusting. And on top of that, she also had another disorder that's very interesting and actually quite rare. That disorder is actually called dependent personality disorder, and she had a very severe case of it. Now, what dependent personality disorder is, in the simplest way I can say it, is that when someone has this disorder, they take on whatever personality of the person or people that they are around. They don't have really one of their own. They don't form their own identity. It's like a really extreme version of the pack mentality. Whatever the pack does, you must do. It's a very, very extreme version of that, is the best way I can describe it. And that would actually come into play much later on. Now, in early 1984, Coleman was actually indicted for the rape and murder of a 14-year-old girl in Illinois, and actually went on the run, bringing Debra Brown along with him. Now, instead of laying low, the pair actually went on a 6-state crime spree, and in just about 2-3 months were wanted for 20 sexual assaults, 8 murders, 4 of them were children, and had earned them a spot on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. And actually, Alton Coleman was actually put on the number 11 spot, which is actually reserved specifically for situations like this, for serial killers and very violent offenders. That's what that 11th spot is actually reserved for. So that's actually quite an accomplishment, I have to say. Now, this all began on May 29th with the kidnapping of Vernita Wheat. Now, she was the 9-year-old daughter of a woman Coleman had actually befriended in Kenosha, Wisconsin. That little girl's body was discovered on June 19th, just a few blocks away from Coleman's grandmother's apartment in Waukegan, Illinois. After, quote-unquote, borrowing a car from another trusting person he had befriended, Coleman and Brown then headed to Gary, Indiana, where they kidnapped 9-year-old Annie and 7-year-old Tamika Turks. Now, unfortunately, Tamika did not survive, and her body was found coincidentally on the same day as Wheat's, while her cousin, Annie, actually had been sexually assaulted by both of these criminals and had in fact survived. In fact, I do believe one of two victims of Alton Coleman and Debra Brown that survived. The other one, I do believe, was a man that they robbed and left for dead, I want to say. And I hesitate to say that they were the lucky ones, because at a certain point, it becomes a little harder to say who was lucky. I mean, you lived, but there's no going back from what they experienced, is what I'm saying. Now, from there, with after that particular kidnapping and murder and sexual assault, the pair then took off across the Midwest to Michigan, then to Ohio, then to Kentucky, the couple burglarizing homes and killing, usually by strangulation, the entire way. In Dayton, Ohio, they actually stayed with a reverend and his wife, even going to church with them and staying there a few days. Their hosts were actually never harmed, and in fact drove Brown and Coleman all the way to Cincinnati. Damn, that's fucking good friends. But soon after that, 15-year-old Toni Stoney actually disappeared on her way to class at her junior high school. Her body was found about 8 days later, again strangled. Only this time, there was a link to the couple, a very conclusive link, that was left behind in the form of Coleman's fingerprint, which would later prove to be essential evidence. Now, as much as I do love forensic science, I have to say this. Fingerprint analysis is not as sciencey as we would like to think. Yes, it has convicted people. Yes, it has done things. But it can also really royally fuck up, because it's not an exact science. It's actually more of a theory. In fact, the same man who created the ideal of eugenics, I'll let you guys look that up if you don't know what that is, because I'm not getting into that subject, just made a theory that the odds of two people having identical fingerprints were so absolutely minuscule that he suggested that it would be impossible, or at the very least so improbable that the odds of it happening would be slim to none. However, cases have happened where people were in fact found guilty of crimes they never committed, one of which was actually a train bombing in Spain. You guys can look that one up as well. And the person who they had kept in prison had never even left the United States. He was actually an accountant. But, like I said, it's not an exact science. It's more of a theory. Moving on from that, the FBI actually found the couple in Evanston, Illinois, and I actually know exactly where that is. They were actually captured on July 20th. They actually did find I believe a knife on Coleman and a gun on Debra Brown. By then, the couple had committed murder in 6 states and were being pursued by authorities from each. Coleman ultimately received 4 death sentences across 3 states, which was a record number at that time. Brown, on the other hand, was sentenced to death in both Indiana and Ohio. However, that was later commuted to life imprisonment. This is because it was concluded that Brown's low IQ meant that she was, at least legally speaking, disabled enough for her to be considered mentally handicapped in the eyes of the law. And since she also suffered, as I said, from a severe case of dependent personality disorder, it was then determined that Brown would not have committed these crimes without the influence of Alton Coleman. However, there are some people who do believe that Debra Brown willingly participated and knowingly participated in these crimes. So the jury is still actually kind of out on that one. Coleman was actually executed by lethal injection in Ohio in April of 2002, while Debra Brown actually now still serves out her life sentence in Ohio. Now, I had to keep that one short because the next one is super fucking long. So, part 2 now is actually now the Atlanta child murders. Now, the Atlanta child murders were actually between the years of 1979 and 1981, although several of them the victims were actually adults. The vast majority of them were children, as sad as that is. And they were committed in America, of course, in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, and lasted, it was about a 2-year period, about May. And at least 28 of them were children and adolescents, and a few of them were adults. These are all believed to be the killings of Wayne Williams, who is actually an Atlanta native who was about 23 years old at the time of the last murder and was arrested and convicted for 2 of the adult murders and is sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. The police subsequently have attributed the number of the child murders to Williams as well and closed the case, although he hasn't been tried or convicted of any of them. In the middle of 1979, Edward Hope Smith, also known as Teddy, and Alfred Evans, also known as Q, both aged 14, disappeared about 4 days apart. Terry Pugh, who actually went missing in early 1981, lived in the same apartment as Smith as well. Their bodies were actually found on July 28th in a wooded area. Edward was with a .22 caliber gunshot wound to his upper back, and these were actually believed to be the first victims of who would then be known as the Atlanta child killer. On September 4th was the next victim, a 14-year-old Milton Harvey. He disappeared while running an errand to the bank for his mother. He was riding a yellow 10-speed bike, which was found about a week later in a remote area in Atlanta. His body, however, was not recovered until November of 1979. In October the 21st, 9-year-old Yusuf Bell went to buy snuff for a neighbor. Holy shit, wow. Yeah, for those of you who don't know what snuff is, it's tobacco. A witness actually said that she saw Yusuf getting into a blue car before he disappeared. His body was actually found on November 8th in an abandoned E.P. Johnson's elementary school by the school janitor, who was looking for a place to basically take a piss. Bell's body was actually found clothed in brown cutoff shorts he was last seen wearing. Though they had a piece of masking tape stuck to them, which they never really figured out why. He had also been hit on the head twice, and the cause of death was strangulation. Police did not immediately link his disappearance with the previous killings, though. At least not at first. On March 4th in 1980, the first female victim was a 12-year-old Angel Lenar. She disappeared when she left her house at around 4 p.m. wearing a denim outfit and was last seen at a friend's house watching the television program Sanford and Son. Now, her body was found about 6 days later in a wooded vacant lot along Campbellton Road. She was wearing the same clothes in which she had left. A pair of white panties, however, that did not belong to her were stuffed into her mouth, and her hands were bound with an electrical cord. The cause of her death was strangulation. On March 11th, about 1 week after the previous victim's disappearance, 11-year-old Jeffrey Mathis disappeared while on an errand for his mother. He was wearing a gray jogging pants, brown shoes, and a white and green shirt. Months later, a girl said she saw him getting into a blue car with a light-skinned man and a dark-skinned man. The body of Jeffrey was found in a briar-covered patch of woodlands. I really don't know how to explain that. I'm sorry. Now, 11 months after he disappeared, by which time it was not possible to identify a cause of death, unfortunately. Now, on May 18th, the body, or the child, 14-year-old Eric Middlebrooks, he disappeared, and he was last seen answering a telephone at home and then leaving in a hurry on his bicycle, taking with him a hammer to repair the bicycle. His body was actually found the next day next to his bicycle in the rear garage of an Atlanta bar located next door to what was the Georgia Department of Offender Rehabilitation. Oh geez, that doesn't sound ominous. His pockets were turned inside out. His chest and arms had slight stab wounds, which I don't fucking know what they mean by that. How do you get a slight stab wound? The cause of death, however, was blunt force trauma to the head. A few weeks before he disappeared, Middlebrooks had testified against 3 juveniles in a robbery case, so that was kind of linked to that, but they're not so sure now. On June 9th, 12-year-old Christopher Richardson went missing on his way home, or on his way to a local pool. He was wearing blue shorts and a light blue shirt and blue tennis shoes, very stylish. His body was not found until the following January, clothed in unfamiliar swim trunks, along with the body of a later victim, Errol Teller. Now, the cause of Richardson's death was actually not determined. On June 22nd, 7-year-old LaTanya Wilson, she disappeared from her parents' apartment. According to witnesses, she appeared to have been abducted by 2 men, one of whom was seen climbing into the apartment window and then holding Wilson in his arms as he spoke to the other man in the parking lot. On October 18th, Wilson's body was found in a fenced-in area at the end of Verbena Street in Atlanta. By then, the body had been skeletonized and no cause of death could be determined. The next day, June 23rd, 10-year-old Aaron White disappeared after having been seen near a local grocery store getting into a blue Chevrolet with either 1 or 2 black men. The witness's description of the car matched the description of a similar car implicated in the earlier Jerry Mathis disappearance. At 6 p.m., Winch was seen at the shopping center. The following day, Winch's body was found under a bridge. The official cause of death was asphyxia from a broken neck suffered in a fall. In July of 1980, 2 more children, Anthony Charter and Errol Teller, were also murdered. Between August and November of 1980, 5 more killings took place. There were no known victims during December. All the victims were African American children between the ages of 7 and 14, and most of them were asphyxiated. The murders continued into 1981. The first known victim in the new year was Luby Gretter, who disappeared on January 3rd. Gretter's body was actually found February 5th. Gretter's friend was actually Terry Pugh, who went missing in January. An anonymous caller actually told police where to find Pugh's body, which was quite interesting. In February, 2 murders occurred, believed to be linked to the others. In March, 4 more murders took place, which included that of Eddie Duncan, the first adult victim. In April, Larry Rogers was murdered, as were the adult ex-convicts John Porter and Jimmy Ray Payne. Say that 5 times fast. Jimmy Ray Payne, Jimmy Ray Payne. After William Barrett went missing on May 16th, 1981, his body was found close to his home. The last victim added to the list was actually Nathaniel Carter, a 27-year-old man. Investigators Chet, I'm going to botch this name, Detelinger, created a map of the victims' locations. Despite the differences in age, the victims fell in the same geographical patterns. They were connected to Memorial Drive and 11 major streets in that area. As the media coverage of the killings intensified, the FBI confidentially predicted that the killer might dump the next victim into a body of water to conceal any evidence. Now, police, knowing this, staked out nearly a dozen area bridges, including crossings of the, I'm gonna fuck this up, but I know it, Chattahoochee River. I probably killed that. During the stakeout on May 22nd in 81, detectives got their first major break when an officer heard a splash beneath one of the bridges. Another officer saw a white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon turn around and drive back across the bridge. Now, two police cars later stopped the suspect in the station wagon about a half mile away from the bridge. The driver was 23-year-old Wayne Burton Williams, a supposed music promoter and freelance photographer. The Chevrolet wagon belonged to his parents. Dog hairs and fibers recovered from the rear of the vehicle were later used as evidence in the case against him, as similar fibers were found on some of the victims, and they were found to have also matched his dog and the carpet in his parents' house. During questioning, Williams said he was on his way to audition one Cheryl Johnson as a singer. Williams claimed she lived in the nearby town of Smyrna. I probably fucked that up too. Police did not find any record of her or the appointment. 2 days later, on May 24th, the nude body of Nathaniel Carter, age 27, was found floating downriver just a few miles from the bridge where police had seen the suspicious station wagon. The body had extensive water damage and may have been in the water up to 2 weeks. Based on the evidence, including the police officer hearing the splash, police believe that Williams had killed Carter and disposed of his evidence while the police were actually nearby. Much circumstantial evidence led to the police to consider Williams as the prime suspect. First, he was the only person stopped during the month-long stakeout of the 12 bridges, and Williams had stopped on the bridge immediately before the splash was heard. According to the FBI Special Agent in charge, John Glover Williams, he admitted to stopping his car, but claimed that he was dumping trash. See, you're either a killer or you're a fucking litterer. And either way, you're a jackass. Later during the trial, however, Williams would claim that he never stopped his car, but instead had turned around in an adjacent lot. Second, police noted that Williams' appearance resembled that of a composite sketch of a suspect, including a bushy afro sticking out from the sides of a baseball cap, and a birthmark or scar on his left cheek. Furthermore, investigators who stopped Williams on the bridge noticed gloves and a 24-inch nylon cord sitting in the passenger seat. Why do these fucking killers keep their shit right there in the passenger seat? I do not understand it. At least hide the shit. According to investigators, the cord looks similar to the ligature marks found on Carter and other victims, but the cord was never taken into evidence for analysis. Adding to the growing list of suspicious circumstances, Williams had handed out flyers in a predominantly black neighborhood calling for young people ages 11 to 21 to audition for his new singing group called Gemini. I think that's also a band. I think that's another band now. Notably, Williams failed an FBI administered polygraph examination. However, there is a citation here. polygraph results are actually no longer admissible as evidence in criminal courts because they are unreliable. In fact, polygraph tests are fucking shit. Literally, someone, a scientist, I forget the dude's name, you can look this up, actually administered a polygraph test to a plant, and it registered. And instead of thinking, this thing is a pile of shit, and is actually just going off randomly, some people actually thought that plants could feel pain and have emotions. Yeah, figure that one out. But also, it's a massive waste of money and it's a massive waste of time. In fact, even the inventor of the polygraph was appalled by the fact that police actually were using it to convict people of crimes, and even called it a Frankenstein's monster. Now, even more evidence seemed to implicate Williams as it went on. Fibers from the carpet in Williams' residence were found to match those observed on 2 of the victims. Additional fibers from Williams' home, vehicles, and pet dog were later matched to fibers discovered on other victims. Furthermore, witness Robert Henry claimed to have seen Williams holding hands and walking with Nathaniel Carter on the night Carter is believed to have died. Now, on June 21st, in 1981, Williams was arrested. A grand jury indicted him for first-degree murder in the death of Nathaniel Carter and Jimmy Ray Payne. The trial date was actually set for early in 1982. Now, FBI agent John E. Douglas, who had previously conducted a widely reported interview with People magazine about profiling the killer as a young black man, has admitted that when the news of Williams' arrest was officially released, his status as a suspect had previously been leaked to the media. He stated that if it had been Williams, then he was looking pretty good for a good percentage of the killings. This was widely reported across FBI media outlets, and as the FBI officially declaring Williams as guilty, and Douglas was actually then censored by the director of the FBI for this. This was a huge fuck up for them. Because in the United States, for those unfamiliar, law enforcement is not allowed to talk about ongoing cases. They're not even supposed to say whether they think the person is guilty or not, because that can actually taint the jury. And what I mean by that is that it can make it so finding a jury that is unbiased either way is actually quite difficult, if not impossible. Now, the jury selection actually began on December 28th and lasted 6 days. The jury was comprised of 9 women and 3 men. Among them, 8 were African American and 4 of them were Caucasian. And they actually do this on purpose. They actually do pick certain juries in certain demographics, more or less so you would think that there wouldn't be a bias, although sometimes that they kind of do that on purpose. America has a kind of a fucked up judicial system. I'm just going to leave it at that. So just so I don't ramble. Anyway, the trial officially began on January 6th in 1982, and Judge Clarence Cooper was presiding. The most important evidence against Williams was the fiber analysis between the victims Williams was indicted for, which was Jimmy Ray Payne, I love that fucking name, and Nathaniel Carter, and the 12 pattern murder cases in which circumstantial evidence basically created numerous links among the crimes. This included witnesses testifying to seeing Williams with the victims, and some of these witnesses suggesting that he had solicited sexual favors from them. Now, the prosecution's presentation of the case has been criticized to the extent that in some jurisdictions it might have resulted in a mistrial. In particular, 2 separate FBI agents testified that the chances of the victims not having to come into contact with Williams was virtually impossible based only on the comparative rarity of the fibers found on the victims that seemed to match the suspect's car and home. Now, Georgia's Supreme Court Justice George T. Smith, after reviewing the case, deemed the evidence, or therefore lack of, inadmissible. Now, on February 27th in 82, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury found Wayne Williams guilty of the 2 murders, and he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in Georgia's Hancock State Prison in Sparta. Dear gods, I'm having flashbacks of fucking 300. On May 6 in 2005, the DeKalb County, Georgia Police Chief Louis Graham ordered a reopening of the murder cases of 5 boys who were killed in that county between February and May of 81 that had been attributed to Williams. Now, Police Chief Graham believed that Williams may have been innocent of these and other murders. The remaining cases are under the jurisdiction of the Fulton County in Georgia, and those authorities consider the related murder cases closed with the arrest and trial of Williams. Williams is now 59 years old and continues to maintain his innocence. In May of 2004, about 6 months after becoming the county police chief in DeKalb in November 2004, Graham reopened the investigations to 5 of the victims: Aaron Weinsch, Curtis Walker, Yusuf Bell, William Barrett, and Patrick Beltzar. Graham was one of the original investigators of the case, and he said he never believed Wayne Williams, the man convicted of two of the killings and blamed for the other 22, was guilty on any of them. And on August 6 of 2005, journalists actually reported that Charles T. Sanders once praised the crimes in secretly recorded conversations. Although Sanders did not claim responsibility for the deaths, lawyers for Williams believe that the evidence will help build a new trial for Williams. Police had investigated Sanders in relation to the murders, but dropped the probe into his and the KKK's possible involvement after Sanders was kept under close surveillance for 7 weeks, during which 4 more victims were killed, and after Sanders and 2 of his brothers volunteered for and passed lie detector tests. Again, citation needed. It was pretty much dropped. The criminal profiler John Douglas actually said that he believes that Williams committed many of the murders. He does not think he committed them all, however. Douglas added that he believes that law enforcement authorities have some idea of who killed the other killers are, cryptically adding, "It isn't a single offender, and the truth isn't pleasant." Yeah, that sounds like fucking X-Files in here. I'm hearing that in my head. On June 21st in 2006, DeKalb County Police dropped its reinvestigation of the Atlanta child murders. After resigning, Graham was replaced by the acting chief, Nick Monarelli, who said, "We dredged up what we had to, and nothing has panned out, so until something does or additional evidence comes our way, or there's forensics feedback from existing evidence, we will continue to pursue the other cold cases that are within our reach." On January 29th in 2007, attorney for the state of Georgia agreed to allow DNA testing of the dog hair that was used to help convict Williams. The decision was a response to a legal filing as a part of Williams' effort to appeal his own conviction and life sentences. Williams' lawyer, Jack Martin, asked Fulton County Superior Court judge to allow the DNA test on canine and human hair and blood, stating that the results might help Williams win a new trial. Now, June 26 in 2007, the DNA test results were then published, but they failed to exonerate Williams. In fact, the results were that the hairs on the body contained the same mitochondrial DNA sequence as Williams' dog. and that the DNA sequences occurs in only about 1 out of every 100 dogs, which actually doesn't really help either way. Now, Dr. Elizabeth Whitcomb, director of the UC Davis laboratory that carried out this testing, told the Associated Press that while the results were fairly significant, they don't conclusively point to William's dog as the source of the hair, because the lab was able to test only for the mitochondrial DNA, which, unlike nuclear DNA, cannot be shown to be unique to one dog. So basically, it didn't do jack shit. Later in 2007, the FBI performed DNA tests on 2 human hairs found on one of the victims. Again, the same kind of DNA sequence in the hairs would eliminate 99.5% of persons by not matching their DNA. Now, the DNA sequence in the hairs would eliminate 98% of African American persons by not matching their DNA. However, they matched William's DNA, so they didn't eliminate the possibility that the hairs were his. So, it's still kind of an ongoing investigation, and I honestly can't say for sure whether I believe he actually did it or if this is just kind of a mass panic that tends to happen when children are the ones that are being targeted. Things tend to get a little fucky in the judicial system. So, unfortunately, this is not a case closed ending for this one. And that is all the time I have for you guys today. I will be doing another double feature video again after this, simply because I am way behind on my list of requests, so bear with me. So until next time, my lovelies, blessed be, and stay classy.